privilege and pleasure to be in front of you today, talking about an important subject and topic, such as peace between people who believe in one God. I'm definitely intrigued by the name of Mark's organization, cultural diplomacy. In my view as a scholar, cultural diplomacy is very important nowadays, and it is definitely a pillar in making peace possible between people of different cultural backgrounds. And religion is very important because most people in the world tend to cling to one religion or the other, or to claim that they cling to one religion or the other. The topic I'm about to speak about today is how religion is viewed in the Muslim world, and why we're having so much difficulty achieving peace between religious groups and also between different religions. I hail from Egypt, actually. That's where my ancestors are, and that's by deduction I'm also a Sunni Muslim. So I come from the Sunni Islamic tradition. Sunni Islam is attributable to what Prophet Muhammad did and what his companions did over centuries, and what the followers of his message did over centuries of Islamic thought and Islamic ideology. Today we're having some serious difficulties within Sunni Islam as to how we deal with the other. How do we deal with Christians and Jews in particular? And hence, much of the acts that you see in Europe, much of the security risks we have in many parts of the world, including this country. For example, my family and I lived in America for close to 40 years now. And I remember days when we used to go and receive our loved ones at the gate of actually at the front gate of like an airplane, an airport. There was no such security lines to speak of. And it was a much more trusting environment than we see today. The way religion has been explained to new generations caused much of the trouble that we see in the world today. Because if I teach my kids that my way is the only true way and everybody else's way is wrong, by deduction, they will think that, what should we do with the others? And then you say, well, just avoid them. And if they represent a threat to you, then you can eliminate them. And you don't have the means to do that, then what you do is you use a vest and you can blow up yourself, and then you'll be glorified in the hereafter. And that's what tends to happen. People ride cars, you go, trucks and go into places, or wear a vest and blow up themselves and all that. It's for a promise of a higher life. That's how they are indoctrinated. A promise of a higher place and a better life than this life. So that's very dangerous teaching. And that is unfortunately is quite prevalent in many places in the world today, until today. One of the other challenges we meet is that when we also explain to new generations that, hey, the books that these other cultures depend on, mainly Jews and Christians, are altered, corrupt books, and they are books that should not be valid or used. And we only have this one text that everybody should believe in. Effectively, we are, discrediting any other religious text, and that also creates a problem. Now, I came to that realization while living here in this country by hearing many sermons that were filled of diatribe and demeaning of people who worship based on the gospel or based on the Torah. And that's when I decided that I should really take time off from my profession, my work. I'm a real estate profession, and go and study the Hebrew Bible. Go and study the Greek gospel. And that's really what led me on that quest. And because I said to myself, that cannot be right that people can form, a good civilization like I see here in America when they have a faulty book that they depend on. Anyhow, just to make a long story short, I came to the realization that we as human beings all have our shortcomings, we have our faults. Events that took place in Europe over 2,000 years were not very helpful in the relationship between, for example, Christianity and Judaism. There have been many downsides to that relationship. And unfortunately, those downsides were inherited by Islam. And that's what we see today. So, for example, the church was teaching for many, many years that we are New Israel. And Old Testament is no good. There's a concept called supersessionism, and we are valid and everybody else is wrong in terms of between Old Testament and New Testament. Now that concept of what we call abrogation or supersessionism was inherited or was taken by Muslim ulama. And those Muslim ulama, and by the way, the word ulama means scholars in Arabic, took that and said, oh, okay, so the church think that they have abrogated Judaism. Well, what we did as Muslims, we've abrogated both Christianity and Judaism. So those two religions, just like the church is saying Judaism is no longer valid, we are now saying that neither Judaism nor Christianity is valid. So they looked at the Quran as a book that trumps all other books and abrogates, making null and void all other books. And that's where the danger lies. As a scholar, I'm here to tell you that it is not the message from God that counts, it's how people explain that message to their followers that can make the difference between reconciliation or anger, between peace and war. So, having said that, I also had to research the topic of what really took place that caused the rift between the Jews and the church. And when I say that, I'm saying that from a loving standpoint, not from any vitriol or hate standpoint. The rift took place because of how certain words that were said by Jesus were later interpreted by the church and caused that rift to grow over the years to places where we saw, Inquisition in Spain, for example, if any of you study the history of Spain. We saw pogroms in Russia, killing Jews there. We saw, of course, the Holocaust in Germany. And it was based mainly on how certain text was understood or explained by men of religion in the church. For example, let me just give you an example. It's attributable to Jesus, peace be upon him, as having said that it is not what comes out of your mouth that defiles you. It's not what goes into your mouth that defiles you. It's what comes out of your mouth that defiles you, in the book of Matthew. Jesus' intention in that was saying to the Pharisees or to his audience at the time, look, I mean, you Jews are, or Israelites, because you were all Israelites, you are so keen about eating kosher food. You are so keen about eating clean food prepared in a certain way. Yet you, certain acts come out of you that are inconsistent, that are hypocritical or wrong, and so forth. And that's the context of how that statement was made. Now, the church, the later generations took that saying and said, okay, so everything, we can eat anything we want, including pork, which is forbidden for the Israelites to eat because it's forbidden in the Old Testament. And that created a rift or a shift between the two traditions, even though they both come from the same source. Another example had to do with observing the Sabbath. Observing the Sabbath is something very big in the Jewish tradition or in the Israelite tradition. You can't do certain things on the Sabbath. It is mentioned in the book of Mark that man was not created for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was created for man. And that also, over the years, was interpreted to mean that you could do anything you want on the Sabbath. Now, the Jewish rabbi said, no, wait a second, this is just diluting our Sabbath, it's diluting our religion, we're going to stick to what we have. And by the way, we're just going to discount Jesus altogether. To us, he does not exist, he's not someone we give credit to for anything. The rift continued, and that's mentioned in many verses in the last message from God the Muslims received, which is the Quran. Now, the Quran is really not a book to trump or cancel previous books. It's a book to reconcile between them, to reconcile between those two previous messages. Unfortunately, the Quran is not being taught that way to the Muslims. If it was taught that way, we would have so much peace in the world. I mean, there are so many verses in the Quran that deals with a certain Jewish position and a Christian position and tries to reconcile between the two. Those verses are not emphasized, shall we say. But the verses that are being emphasized are the ones that have to do with, jihad and going out and, just killing the kafir. And that's another term, the derogatory term that means infidel or non-believer and so forth. So, having taken you on that journey of some of what we see in the world today and where it stems from, I'd like to share with you that based on my studies as a scholar of Islam and of course of the Bible, that the good news is there is a way for those traditions that to exist and prosper. by focusing on the parts of their text that help each follower of the tradition, whatever tradition it is, to have to stand on higher moral grounds and to have higher ethical and moral inclinations. For example, when I say higher ethical and moral standards, the Quran in the 5th chapter in verse number 48 acknowledges that there will be differences between people who claim to worship God. There will be differences. And the Quran further goes to say that it was intended that way, that God intended that we would have differences among us, and that we would be tested on what we are given, tested based on our patience. So my patience will never be tested until, for example, as a Muslim, until, as you can come to me and say, well, you know what, I don't acknowledge Muhammad as a prophet at all. Or a Christian can say, well, I worship Jesus. It's okay. I mean, as a Muslim, I consider Jesus, for example, as a prophet. I don't consider him as a deity. But if I have a neighbor that worships Jesus, I should still treat him with ihsan. And that's a concept in Arabic mentioned in the Quran also, that says that roughly translates into kindness. Treat them with kindness. So my message today is that it is definitely possible that we can have peace based on our respective traditions. I often point my Christian brothers and sisters, friends, to the book of Matthew chapter 5, Sermon on the Mount, as basis to have actual relationships with everyone else. I point Jewish friends and scholars to what came in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 27, about how to conduct yourself and deal with others. And with Muslims, there is chapter 49 in our book that have very high moral and ethical values. If we subscribe to those texts, we will definitely have paradise on this earth before there's paradise anywhere else. Because that's what humans aspire to have. They want to have, everyone is looking for nirvana, looking for paradise on earth, they're looking for the kingdom, looking for being at peace, not only with God, but also at peace with themselves, at peace with their neighbors. And the good news is this is achievable and it's possible. And wherever you are, in whatever tradition you are, this is possible and that's achievable. With those words, I would like to conclude. And if there is some questions from the audience, I'll take those questions. And thank you for listening. Yes, please.
Yes, hello, Veronica Sobar. A Spanish citizen, but from Jewish origins.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want to ask something to you. I don't know if I've interpreted correctly your words, but it seems to be that someone has been feeding some kind of ideology, and that someone has benefited maybe from this kind of ideology.
Yes.
And I'm pretty much curious to know, I mean, what do you think, I mean, who do you think was behind this kind of movement? So, of course, I understand it's very sensitive, but you know that there are rumors, for instance, the latest terrorist attack in Barcelona was planned by an imam, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So he was the brain of this operation, and I think it shocked everybody
Okay.
to know that that was the person.
That the religious leader would be behind.
Exactly.
Okay.
So this
Yeah.
is my first question is to know what you think. I mean, who benefited from this, And the second question is, what has changed?
Okay.
Why now everybody seems to agree that we better promote peace because this extremism seems to have moved from benefiting someone to be, in the end, very bad for everybody. So
Yes.
it sounds like everything has gone out of hands, and that now, we're all paying the consequences of this extremism.
Okay.
So I wanted to know.
So let me paraphrase the question. Your question is two parts. One is who benefits from what took place, and why all of a sudden we're focused and wanting to resolve this. I'm sorry, your name is? Veronica. Beautiful. Oh, great. Yes, I love that name. So to answer the first question, who benefits? I think extremists benefit. First of all, you have to know that extremism is not only detrimental to other religions, it is really detrimental to Muslims. It is detrimental to Muslims themselves, as much as it is detrimental to Jews or Christians or anybody else. But those extremists don't know any other way to explain why there is more than one message given by God to certain people. They call God as one God, and God has given three messages: the Torah, the Gospel, and the Quran. And because none of them actually read anything in the Torah or the Gospel, or the Bible in general, they discount previous messages. And therefore they discount people who follow previous messages. But let's think about it this way. Think of me, Omer Salem, here today, not as a scholar coming to speak with you about relation between different religions, but think of me as a weapons merchant. I'm selling weapons. Okay? Now, it's conceivable to say that I would profit by selling security apparatuses and weapons to whoever wants to buy, because they say, okay, those Muslims are dangerous, you should buy this gun from me, or you should buy this security apparatus to protect yourself. And then I can also go to the other side and say, you know what, they bought this size gun, I want to give you something bigger to be able to counter what they bought. So there's that aspect. But there's also another aspect. We have a slogan here in America in the media that says, if it bleeds, it leads. What that slogan means that the media thrives on, spreading the news about these attacks. Why people pay attention, there's more ads, there's more financial gain that can come out of this, unfortunately. So, in my mind, it is possible that there are players behind the scene who benefit from extremist acts. And that's my interpretation on the first question. Now, the second question, why are we now focused on trying to prevent these things from happening? Well, because very soon it is contagious, and violence begets violence. Okay? If I'm violent towards you, eventually you're gonna have to be violent towards me. So it's gonna, and then my kids gonna see you violent towards me, then they become violent towards your kids, and so on, and it's just a vicious cycle. So the attempt by, whether it is scholars or politicians or people in position of power to subdue this trend or derail this trend is definitely worthwhile, because this is like a snowing ball that's going to just escalate and escalate until it reaches all of us. Thank you, Veronica. Yes, sister.
Yes, listening to your speech, find, well, the impression it had on me, I'm wondering what impression it might have on the audience. As a Muslim, it sounds as if an entire generation of Muslims are being taught the tenets of extremism, when the second version, if we can like put it into, you put a nutshell of the extreme version of Islam and a nutshell of what you presented as your version of Islam as it should be, maybe, just to make it short. But what I've always received in mosques in the last 30 years till today is that version, the good version that you present, and I have never heard the extreme version being preached.
Okay.
And that's what, and I'm speaking for a Muslim in America who has met Muslims from around the world over the course of 30 years as an adult. I've even been to Spain this summer and met Muslims there who also. So I have
Okay.
not. I haven't met one person who even sympathizes with extremists, but yet the way I heard your speech is as if we have this huge problem, ideological problem, where our young people, an entire generation, is being taught this, and now we better do something about it. When I know we have to do something about it, but what is it? But we cannot distort the facts that,
Okay.
that this is not what.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
I'm sorry?
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Iman Osman.
Iman Osman.
Yeah.
So the question, as I understood it from you, Iman, is this version of extremism real? Is it being taught? Is it actually,
I
does it
think
exist?
it's real, but I don't believe it's an entire generation that
Okay.
is being taught. In fact, in all my 30 years, I've never heard it promoted once.
Okay.
Not even by a friend or by an associate or by an acquaintance of meeting in one
Okay,
hour.
let me ask you something. Iman, are you from Egypt, by the way?
No, I'm American, from Poland.
Okay, okay. So you happen to be a European Muslim living in America. Did you embrace Islam, or did you?
I embraced Islam.
You embraced Islam
As a college student.
as a college student. Okay, excellent. What is the biggest Islamic university?
Al-Azhar.
Al-Azhar. Okay. Have you visited Al-Azhar?
No, but I've been to Egypt, but I haven't.
You've been to Egypt, you've never visited Al-Azhar. Okay. Okay. I happen not only to visit Al-Azhar, I happen to have been taught by professors at Al-Azhar. So I'm privy to the curriculum and to what's being taught. And while you living here in the West, you don't hear these issues in extremism and so forth. What's unfortunate is that if you go to Al-Azhar, next time go there and just go to the masjid, to go to the main mosque of Al-Azhar. Ask any student there who studied there at Al-Azhar. Did Islam trump or abrogate Jews and Christians? Just ask that simple question. You don't have to ask any more than that. Okay? And the answer you will get is yes, it has. Okay? So that's the beginning. Now, you can also ask him a second question. What do you think of the books that preceded the Quran? That's another book. That's another question that you might ask. And they'll tell you what they are being taught. They're invalid.
I did ask that question, and I was told that they were books given to prophets prior to Prophet Muhammad.
Okay, you were told that by whom, please?
By everyone that question has ever come up with in any mosque
Okay.
or any conversation I've had.
Okay.
There's respect. Like you said in your second version of Islam, the good version, you said that, that we have respect for books of the Christians and Jews, and that's all I've ever heard.
Okay. That's all you've ever heard because you lived here in America, probably. Even though there are
I've been to Spain. I've met Muslims from around the world, and I've met Muslims from here who have immigrated coming from places around the world, including as far as Japan, which is very rare. But I've met more than one Japanese.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Just to show you the range, because it's not just.
The range does exist, but I'm saying that the theology and the ideology of supersessionism or abrogation is real. That's all I'm saying.
Doctor, excuse me.
Yes.
Allow me to speak because I have an identical background like her. I am a Christian but raised in a Muslim society in Pakistan. And if you ask me the same question that you asked her, I could give you the answers very quickly. I have heard on the loudspeakers that Christians and Muslims are enemies. Christians and Jews are the enemies of the Christians, the Muslims.
You've heard
Yes,
that?
I have heard myself
Mhm.
being sitting in the mosque also.
Yes.
Okay. I have also heard that, and I have not only heard, but it has been part of my curriculum that the Christian, Jews and Hindus are infidel, they are dishonest, and whatever honesty and good gesture they show, it is just for the sake of show.
Yes, that's what I said in the beginning.
So very
Yeah.
interestingly, there are many things.
Mhm.
There are many things to ask. For example, keeping in view your excellent experience and the way you present the things. For me, it's always clear understanding that since the real interpretation of the religion
Mhm.
had no last verdict as the Chief Justice of any court does, everyone has his own authority, his own position. Even the big scholars or the torchbearers or the light showers of any religion, their interpretation is not binding. Like, for example, as a Catholic, the Pope's teaching, morally I accept it, but it's not legal binding.
Okay.
Okay? For example, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. I had a
Yeah. Please ask me the question because other people want to ask questions.
Okay. I had a presentation yesterday on the interfaith harmony.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I could get very little time for that. But quick questions. Number one, is blasphemy law Quranic law?
Mhm.
Second one, is a person who deviates from Islam liable to death? Is he murtad?
Okay.
I hope you got that point.
Okay. Thank you. Let me answer that question.
Another point. Is preaching allowed in Islamic State, the preaching of other religions?
Okay.
And the last one is women of the other religion is allowed to marry with a Muslim and she can still be Christian or whatever religion has, and is the woman belonging to Muslim, if she marries out of the community, is she also liable to death?
Well, that's a litany of questions here. About 5 or 6. I'm sorry, introduce yourself, please.
Now, my name is Dr. Sabir Michael. I
Okay.
teach at University of Karachi in the Department of Social Work.
Thank you.
Work for Interfaith Harmony.
Thank you very much. Well, I definitely want to thank you for your candid and sincere and honest feedback on what you actually heard in the mosque, which I'm going to repeat, that you told us that you heard that Hindus, Jews, and Christians are infidel. Did you hear that?
Yeah. I
Okay.
read everything that I was read,
Okay.
taught in class.
Now, Sister Iman, this is not an aberration. This is not
I
some.
never said it was an aberration. I'm just saying that if it's presented as a generation is being taught the way it felt when I heard you,
I am here.
I would say that not
Okay.
an aberration, but just not as common as you made it seem to be.
Okay, maybe it may not be common in the circles that you have been exposed to, but I'm here to tell you that, sister, it is really, truly, honestly common in many parts of the Arab and Islamic world.
Okay, I
Okay.
can't speak for the rest of the world, but still,
Okay.
it's really unusual that I wouldn't have heard.
Okay, now, if it was not common in those places, we would not find youth who are willing to put the vest on and go explode themselves in flash.
Okay,
And
also, brother, there's a problem. I did
But-
never say, and a man of your level of education and accomplishment, how did you hear me say that it was an aberration? That proves
Okay.
our credibility.
Question.
in my
Okay.
mind.
Well, no, you tried to say that that you never heard it. Okay.
And that's the honest.
Okay.
That's just an
And all I'm telling you is that
I
you must
never
live
said
in
it.
an Islamic bubble.
Yeah.
You're living in an Islamic bubble. You're not living in reality. I'm here to give you a reality check. And by giving you that reality check, thank God somebody here in the audience, I don't know him, the professor from Pakistan, we first met here, and he testified to what I just said. At any rate, let's move on with the questions that he has, because we have other questions from the audience, and I don't want to take much time to debate this. The question is how Muslims look at the murtad, or the apostate, the person who leaves the religion. Okay. If we look at the Quranic text, the Quranic text itself does not have a punishment, like a worldly punishment, like being flagged or being beheaded or any of these capital punishments in the Quran for a person who leaves the faith. So where do we have the problem? The problem comes from sayings, hadith, that is attributable to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that says that someone who leaves the religion should be killed. Okay? Man baddala dinahu faqtuluh. I don't know if the sister heard that hadith before. Sister Iman, have you been in discussions where this was debated, or?
Not debated, but maybe questioned as it is for right now.
Okay. At any rate, it is definitely the wide understanding that once you become a Muslim, you can't go back. And that's not based on the Quran, but that's based on hadith. Now, the challenge with hadith is that there are authenticated hadith, and there are hadith that are being fabricated and put in the corpus of hadith for certain political gain that has nothing to do with the religion. And throughout the history of Islam, we had many of these hadith that have been fabricated to solve certain political problems that early Muslims had. Because among early Muslims, there have been more killing among Muslims themselves than anything else. The second caliph of the Islam was killed. The third caliph, Osman, I think your name is Amal Osman. You know what happened to Khalifa Osman ibn Affan? He was killed by Sahaba, by Muslims, by companions of the Prophet. He killed the guy. Ali ibn Abi Talib, I mean, many people may have heard of him. He was also killed by Muslims. His son Al-Hussein was killed by Muslims. It is just, there had been, and it's all justified based on understanding certain texts in the Quran that gives them the authority to do this, to do what they did. So, just the short answer for Professor, I'm sorry, your name, Professor?
My name is Dr. Sabir Michael.
Saber?
Michael.
Saber Michael, okay. Dr. Saber. By the way, Saber means patient in Arabic. So thank you for your patience. The answer is, if we rely on Quranic text, there is no capital punishment. If we rely on Hadith, yes, there is capital punishment. And because we are practicing more of what came in the Hadith, that's the more prevalent view that's held by the scholars. And unfortunately, they devise and develop methodology to where Hadith can trump or abrogate the Quran itself. So now we're facing not only that the Quran abrogated previous messages, but that the Hadith abrogated the Quran. So we enter into this vicious circle of where is the truth and how can we relate to others. Anyhow, I think one of the questions Professor Saber asked was, can you remind me of the second question, yes?
It was about blasphemy law. Is it Quranic law?
Okay, blasphemy law is not a Quranic law. But again, it is put together for what rulers thought it keeps the peace. The reason they have blasphemy laws on the books in places like my native Egypt, for example, and many other Arab countries, is, and Islamic countries, of course, in Pakistan, they say because that keeps the peace. Now, for example, in Pakistan, if you insult the Prophet, what happened?
Capital punishment.
Capital punishment. Okay, so if you insult the Prophet, there's capital punishment. And that's not only in Pakistan. Many other places are. It's the same punishment. But again, if we go to, there are many slogans that are going out there. Jesus is the answer. Islam is the answer. So much is the answer. I would say, from my perspective as a Muslim scholar, the answer to Muslims is to go back to the text of the Quran, to go back to the pristine text that was never changed, and to rely more on that text and less on texts that were brought together 100 years and 200 years after Prophet Muhammad's demise, or after he left this world, peace be upon him. So, blasphemy laws are, they're there. They say to protect the peace. They don't want you to say anything wrong about Prophet Muhammad or about Allah. Now, the Quran itself and the seerah of Prophet Muhammad has many, many instances where he was insulted by his companion. He was ridiculed. Allah was ridiculed. Allah was insulted. And it's recorded in the Quran. Okay? That Allah, if the Quran acknowledged that Allah is insulted, and Allah is definitely almighty, all capable of protecting himself, and he doesn't, and he let people insult him. And we have a verse there that says, "Man sha'a falyu'min wa man sha'a falyakfur." Those who want to believe, let them believe. Those who don't want to believe, let them not believe. Then we have basis for giving human intellect ways to express itself. Even if you disagree with Islam, that's fine. You disagree with Allah or with His Prophet, that's fine. According to the Quran, that's fine. But it is not fine according to certain hadith that came later on, a few hundred years after the Prophet. And they are the ones put in practice today. So that's my answer to you regarding blasphemy laws. I'm going to go to the sister here because she had a question, and then if there's more time, I can come to you. Yeah, please go ahead, sister.
Hi, Kathleen Smith.
Thank you, Kathleen.
I just had a question. I appreciate you sharing your story about your quest to discover how the religions are related. What was your first point as a Muslim where you discovered this? You had grown up thinking that Islam was, a good religion. Was the first time that you heard about all of this, extremism? Was it when you went to college in Egypt, or had you heard it before that?
Well, as I mentioned, the whole family immigrated to this country about 40 years ago to California. So I came here in high school, first year of college. I've seen in Egypt, I was born 1960, so in the late 70s, I saw some, Islamic movement, like the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, in Egypt. And I first experienced them in high school and in my first year in college, where, for example, we had, I'll just kind of give you an instance, the school where I went to, we had a swimming pool. And there was so much controversy over whether it should be used. Private clubs have swimming pools in Egypt, and men go in the swimming pool and women go in the swimming pool. But when it came to college campus, because these groups were very strong, they prevented anyone from using the swimming pool because they said that it is haram to wear shorts and go in the swimming pool, and of course for women it will also be haram or not permitted to go in bikinis or to go to go in the pool anyway. So that was one of my first experiences there. Here in America, I've experienced forms of extremism in the early 80s when I came here, and it took place at a masjid where I went to pray after a soccer game. And when you play soccer, you usually wear shorts. So I went to the masjid with shorts, and it was prayer time, made wudu, came to stand up and do this and so forth. And one of the people who were praying there, pulled me aside, and in very demeaning Arabic terms said that basically you do that, you're going to hell. In other words, it was not like kind, loving experience where he says, brother, it's better to wear something longer. It's inappropriate, but it was some harsh words were used. And that's why, many people tend to blame. They say, okay, we don't find love in Islam. Love is in Christianity only. We don't have love in Islam. And the word love is nowhere to be seen in the Quran. As a scholar, I disagree with that. The word love does exist in the Quran, and it's definitely a beautiful book for those who understand the Arabic language and can really appreciate the Quran for what it is and discount all the noise that takes place from outside. And like the word I mentioned, ihsan, is an all-encompassing word in Arabic that means kindness, love, reverence. It has many beautiful words, and that word is all over the Quran. So that's to answer your question. I did experience some of that here. But what really drove me to try to do a research and do something about it is that I found people of religion tend to measure how close they are to the Creator, how obedient they are, by how much they dislike other human beings, by how much they hate. So when I felt that, okay, how can you measure your closeness to God by how much you hate another human being? I felt something is wrong, and I really ought to study and dig deep into a way to be a Muslim and not having to demean anybody else. And believe me, that problem is not only in Islam. It is also it is in Christianity. It's in Judaism. I can stand here and quote you something from the Talmud that the Jews and the Gentiles, the Goyim, the non-Jews, and how they are like animals, and they are there to serve the Jews. So, unfortunately, it does exist in other traditions as well, but it causes conflict and strife, anger, and what have you. Anyhow, thank you. I'll take one or two last questions before we convene. So I'll probably go back to Professor Saber because he had a question that I didn't answer. But Professor Saber, do you want to say something?
No, it's okay. You can keep on.
Okay. Well, in conclusion, I just want to say that events that are happening around us in the world today, they're not coming from a vacuum. Those man-made problems or catastrophes come from believing or having a certain perspective of the world out there, and the solution to that is education. The solution to extremism is not to face it with another form of extremism, because it's only going to make it grow. But the solution to extremism is learning and education. So, as a Muslim, it will behoove me to learn more about other traditions. And as a man of another tradition, Christian or Jew, it behooves me to learn about what Muslims study, what Christians study, and Jews study. Because short of that, we will be having a snowball effect that is going to leave no one in safety. So I laid out the problem and I mentioned the solution. And we're all capable of making that solution happen. I always invite Christians and Jews to own a copy of the Quran. If you're coming with this program tomorrow, the next day, I might be able to, I have a few copies of the Quran that I'll give. You should always have a copy of that book. And just read it, just like read the Bible, just read what that says. And I also invite the Muslims to read a copy of the Bible. Not with the intention of nitpicking and getting and seeing, oh, okay, here's what's wrong with this, what's wrong with that. No. But with the intention of, let's extract something beautiful here so I can hold my Muslim friend to that verse in the Quran that is so beautiful, that resonated with me as a Christian. Or if I'm a Muslim, I want to read the Bible so I can hold my Jewish or Christian friend with something that resonates with me very well as a Muslim, that I can hold them to that text in their own book. So with that, I want to thank you. I want to thank Mark, my friend Mark here, and the audience for taking the time to listen. Thank you very much.